We are taught that there is safety in numbers, that as long as you can see or hear your loved ones, you are perfectly safe. But the wilderness does not play by our rules. In this full documentary, we are going deep into 3 of the most disturbing disappearances in history. 3 boys who vanished into thin air, just steps away from their parents, their friends, and absolute safety. Some left behind chilling, impossible evidence. Others left nothing but silence. We begin with a case that will make you rethink ever letting someone walk out of your sight, even for 6 seconds. It takes exactly 14 days for nature to erase all traces of a human being. But in the case of Dennis Martin, the forest didn't wait 14 days. It took less than 5 minutes. On June 14th, 1969, Dennis was 6 years old. He had wavy brown hair, dark eyes with long lashes, and a smile that made everyone around him feel at ease. He was wearing a bright red t-shirt, the kind of red that stands out against any background, the kind of red you could spot from 100 yards away. He was walking less than 50 feet from his father in a grassy meadow called Spence Field, deep in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. His father watched him duck behind a bush to hide. It was a game. The boys were going to surprise the adults. 3 to 5 minutes later, Dennis's father called his name. No answer. He called again. Nothing. He walked to the bush where he had last seen his son. Dennis was gone. No cry for help, no sound of running footsteps, no rustle of leaves being pushed aside. Just the wind moving through the ancient trees. Just the silence of 500,000 acres of wilderness. And a 6-year-old boy who had simply vanished. What followed was the largest search operation in the history of the Great Smoky Mountains. 1,400 searchers, 56 square miles covered on foot, over 1,000 helicopter sorties, Green Berets, FBI agents, bloodhounds, and not a single trace of Dennis Martin was ever found. But there was something else. Something that happened 7 miles away, roughly 1 hour after Dennis disappeared. Something involving a scream that witnesses described as enormous and sickening, and a wild-looking man carrying something red over his shoulder. That detail would haunt investigators for decades, and to this day, no one has ever explained it. The Martin family had a tradition that stretched back generations. Every Father's Day weekend, the men of the family would pack their gear and head into the Great Smoky Mountains for a camping trip. It was a ritual, a rite of passage. In June of 1969, William Martin brought his 2 sons on this annual pilgrimage. 9-year-old Douglas had done this before. But for 6-year-old Dennis, this was his first overnight camping adventure in the wilderness. William's father, Clyde, came along too. 3 generations of Martin men, walking the same trails their ancestors had walked. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park spans over 500,000 acres, straddling the border between Tennessee and North Carolina. It contains some of the highest peaks in the eastern United States. Dense forests of oak, hemlock, and pine blanket the slopes in an unbroken green canopy that can swallow the sunlight whole. The park was established in 1934, but the mountains themselves are ancient. Among the oldest on Earth. They have watched countless creatures come and go over hundreds of millions of years. They are patient, they are indifferent, and they keep their secrets On Friday, June the 13th, the Martin party began their hike from Cades Cove, a popular valley known for its wildlife and historic buildings. They walked for hours along the trail, climbing steadily into the high country. Dennis kept pace with the adults, despite his small legs and his youth. The family reached Russell Field by evening and spent the night in a shelter cabin, surrounded by the sounds of the forest settling into darkness. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. The kind of June day that feels like a gift. The sky was impossibly blue. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of wildflowers and pine. The family packed up and continued east along the Appalachian Trail toward Spence Field, a high grassy meadow with panoramic views of the surrounding peaks. They arrived in the early afternoon and met up with another family they knew, also named Martin, though there was no relation. Dr. Carter Martin from Huntsville, Alabama, was there with his 2 young sons. The boys from both families quickly became playmates, running through the tall grass while the adults sat and talked nearby. It was around 4:30 in the afternoon when the children hatched their plan. A simple prank. They would sneak through the meadow and jump out to surprise the grown-ups. Douglas and the 2 other boys decided to circle around from the south and west. But Dennis was wearing that bright red shirt, too easy to spot. So they told him to go the other way, to approach from the northwest, near the tree line by the Appalachian Trail. William Martin watched his youngest son walk toward a large bush at the edge of the meadow. He saw Dennis duck down behind it. The red shirt disappeared into the green. A few minutes later, the other 3 boys burst out from their hiding spot, laughing and shouting. But Dennis never appeared. At first, William thought his son was just taking the joke further, hiding longer to get a bigger reaction. He called out, "Dennis, you can come out now." The laughter faded. The other boys looked around. The adults began to stand. 3 to 5 minutes. That's all it had been. 3 to 5 minutes, since William had watched his son walk toward that bush. Now the bush was empty. The tree line was silent, and Dennis was nowhere to be seen. William ran. He ran west along the Appalachian Trail for nearly a mile, shouting his son's name until his throat burned. He checked behind every tree, every rock, every depression in the ground. Nothing. He ran back and searched to the east. Nothing. The other adults fanned out across the meadow and into the surrounding forest. They called and called. Their voices echoed off the mountains and returned to them empty. As the shadows began to lengthen, William's father, Clyde, made a decision. He would hike out to get help. The nearest ranger station was at Cades Cove, nearly 9 miles away. Clyde Martin was 60 years old. He walked those 9 miles as fast as his legs would carry him. He arrived at the ranger station at approximately 8:30 that evening. By then, darkness had fallen over the mountains, and so had the rain. The storm came without warning. One moment the sky was merely overcast. The next, sheets of water were pouring down on the mountains with a violence that seemed almost personal. Thunder rolled across the peaks like cannon fire. Lightning split the darkness. In a matter of hours, nearly 3 inches of rain fell on Spence Field and the surrounding wilderness. The temperature dropped to around 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Streams that had been gentle trickles became raging torrents. Trails turned to mud. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. Somewhere out there, a 6-year-old boy in a thin red t-shirt and short green pants was alone in the darkness. If he was still alive. The search began in earnest at 5 o'clock the next morning. 30 park rangers set out at first light, checking every drainage, every hollow, every possible path a small child might have taken. By midday, the number of searchers had grown to over 200. College students, local hunters, firefighters, and rescue teams from across the region poured into the park. The rain continued. Heavy mist clung to the mountains, reducing visibility and grounding the helicopters that had been called in. The scent dogs were held back because officials believed the rain had washed away any trail Dennis might have left. Later, this decision would be questioned. If Dennis was still moving after the storm, he would have created a fresh scent trail. But by then, the window of opportunity had closed. Day after day, the search expanded. 300 searchers on Monday, nearly 400 on Tuesday, over 600 by Wednesday, close to 800 by Thursday. A group of 71 Green Berets who had been conducting training exercises in western North Carolina arrived to help navigate the treacherous terrain. The FBI sent agents. Boy Scout troops already camping in the area joined the effort. 2 Huey helicopters flew up from Georgia. By the end of June, 1,400 people had searched over 56 square miles of wilderness. More than 13,000 man-hours had been logged. Over 1,100 helicopter sorties had scanned the forest canopy. And they found nothing. No red shirt caught on a branch. No small shoe abandoned on a trail. No sign that Dennis Martin had ever walked beyond that bush at the edge of Spence Field. But there were anomalies. Small details that didn't fit. Details that, even now, remain unexplained. Several days into the search, 2 men from the town of Townsend noticed something near the west prong of the Pigeon River. A footprint. Small. Child-sized. The print showed 1 foot bare and 1 foot in what appeared to be a low-cut Oxford shoe. The exact type of shoe Dennis Martin had been wearing when he disappeared. The tracks led to a stream and then vanished, as if whoever made them had simply walked into the water and never walked out. Park officials dismissed the prints. They concluded they must have been left by a Boy Scout involved in the search. But retired Ranger Dwight McCarter, who worked the case, later pointed out a problem with that theory. None of the Boy Scouts were searching barefoot, and the prints were not part of a group. They were isolated. A single child walking alone, 1 shoe on and 1 shoe off. The FBI never fully investigated those prints. The area had already been searched once, they reasoned. There was no need to go back. But there was another lead. One that was even more disturbing. On the afternoon that Dennis disappeared, a 45-year-old man named Harold Key was hiking with his family near Rowan's Creek in an area called Sea Branch. It was roughly 7 miles from Spence Field, a significant distance through rugged mountain terrain. But sound travels strangely in the mountains, and time can warp under stress. Harold Key heard a scream. He later described it as enormous and sickening, the kind of scream that makes your blood freeze. At first, the Key family thought one of their own children was being attacked by a bear. They looked around frantically, but all their children were accounted for. Then Harold's son pointed at something moving through the trees. "Look, a bear," the boy said. But it wasn't a bear. Harold Key saw a man, rough-looking, unkempt. He was moving through the woods near where the scream had come from, moving stealthily, as if trying not to be seen. And he was carrying something over his shoulder. Something made of cloth. Something red. The Key family didn't connect their sighting to the missing boy until days later, when they returned home and heard the news. Harold reported what he had seen to the authorities. He was taken back into the park to try to identify the exact location. But the FBI ultimately concluded there was insufficient evidence to link the sighting to Dennis Martin's disappearance. Their reasoning was logical. Sea Branch was roughly 7 miles from Spence Field. By trail, the distance was closer to 9 miles. For a 6-year-old to cover that ground in roughly an hour was deemed impossible. And Harold Key was uncertain about the exact timeline. But the FBI's files on the case remained sealed for over 50 years. Only in 2022, after relentless Freedom of Information requests, were they finally released to the public. And what those files revealed raised as many questions as they answered. The agents had noted that William Martin's mental health suffered greatly after losing his son, that he was vulnerable to the claims of psychics, that he clung to stories about feral people living in the park. The FBI's conclusion was that Dennis had most likely died of exposure, and that his body had been washed away by the flooding streams. But they never explained the scream. They never explained the rough-looking man with the red cloth. And they never explained why, in a search involving 1,400 people, not a single thread from Dennis's red shirt was ever found. Years later, another piece of the puzzle emerged, though it only deepened the mystery. Sometime in the 1970s, a man who made his living illegally harvesting ginseng in the park claimed to have stumbled upon something in a remote hollow called Big Hollow near Tremont. Scattered skeletal remains, small bones, the skull of a child. The man said nothing for over a decade. He was afraid of being prosecuted for his illegal activity. It wasn't until 1985 that he finally came forward and told authorities what he had seen. A search was conducted. Rangers scoured Big Hollow, which lies roughly 3 miles downhill from where Dennis disappeared. But by then, too much time had passed. The forest floor in the Smokies accumulates roughly 1 inch of debris every year. Fallen leaves, decaying wood, organic matter settling layer upon layer. After 16 years, any remains would have been buried under more than a foot of natural sediment. Nothing was found. The official search for Dennis Martin ended on September 14th, 1969, 3 months after he vanished. But for his family, the search never truly ended. William Martin returned to those mountains again and again. He walked the same trails. He stood in the same meadow where he had last seen his son alive. He offered a $5,000 reward for information. In $1969, that was a fortune, the equivalent of over $40,000 today. No one ever claimed it. William Martin went to his grave believing that his son had been taken, that someone or something had carried Dennis out of those mountains, that somewhere, in some form, his boy had survived. The family never spoke publicly about the case after the search ended. The wound was too deep, the absence too complete. So what happened to Dennis Martin? The most widely accepted theory is the simplest. Dennis became disoriented. He wandered into the forest and quickly lost his bearings in the dense underbrush. When the storm hit that night, he had no shelter, no warmth, no way to protect himself. Hypothermia can set in quickly in a child. Their bodies lose heat faster than adults. By morning, he would have been too weak to call out, too weak to move. The park superintendent wrote in a September 1969 letter that if Dennis was ever found, he would likely be discovered within a few miles of the shelter where he disappeared, hidden beneath the undergrowth, swallowed by the forest. But if that's true, why was nothing ever found? Not a shoe, not a scrap of fabric, not a single bone. Some have suggested animal predation. Black bears, wild boars, and bobcats all inhabit these mountains. Ranger Dwight McCarter noted that in June 1969, natural food sources for bears were unusually scarce. Weeks before Dennis disappeared, rangers had released a malnourished bear from a trap near Spence Field. The bear had been caught eating corn from a wild boar trap. Corn is not a normal part of a bear's diet. A desperate, hungry animal might behave in unpredictable ways. But predation typically leaves evidence. Disturbed ground, scattered remains, blood. The search teams found nothing. Then there is the abduction theory. The theory that William Martin himself came to believe. Harold Key's account of the rough-looking man with the red object has never been adequately explained. The FBI dismissed it because of the distance, 7 miles through mountain terrain in roughly an hour. Impossible for a child, but not impossible for an adult carrying a child. There are legends in these mountains. Stories passed down through generations. Stories of people who went into the wilderness and never came out. Of hermits and squatters living in the deep hollows, far from roads and ranger stations. Of wild men who have forgotten how to live among other humans. In 1973, 4 years after Dennis vanished, a park ranger encountered a squatter in the remote Cataloochee region. The man pulled a gun. There was a struggle. The squatter fled into the forest and was never captured. He became known as the Wild Man of Cataloochee. Were there others like him in 1969? Men living off the grid, in the shadows, watching hikers pass through their territory. We don't know. We may never know. The Great Smoky Mountains cover over 500,000 acres. Large portions have never been thoroughly explored. There are caves, sinkholes, abandoned mines, and hollows so deep and overgrown that sunlight barely reaches the forest floor. A person could live their entire life in these mountains without ever being seen by another human being, and a child could disappear into them in less than 5 minutes. Today, Trail 247, leading to Spence Field, is still open to the public. Thousands of hikers walk it every year, photographing the mountain laurel and the panoramic views. They set up camp in the same meadow where the Martin family spent that June afternoon. They watch their children play in the tall grass. Most of them have never heard of Dennis Martin. They don't know that in that exact spot, 56 years ago, a 6-year-old boy walked behind a bush and never walked out. That 1,400 people searched for him and found nothing. That somewhere, 7 miles away, a scream echoed through the forest. A scream that was described as sickening, enormous. The kind of scream you never forget. The forest doesn't tell. It never has. It simply stands there, green and ancient and patient, the same as it was before humans ever walked these slopes. The trees know. They were there. They saw what happened that afternoon in June. But trees don't speak. Dennis Martin would have turned 63 years old this year. If he's still alive, if he ever left those mountains, his case remains officially open. His name still appears in the National Missing and Unidentified Persons database. His photograph, showing a smiling boy with wavy brown hair and dark eyes, still circulates in missing persons bulletins. The search changed everything about how missing persons cases are handled in national parks. The chaos and disorganization of the 1969 effort became a case study in what not to do. Training programs were developed. Protocols were established. Smaller, more coordinated search teams replaced the overwhelming crowds that trampled potential evidence in the Smokies. Dennis Martin's disappearance saved lives, just not his own. The deputy park superintendent said it best. "I think it is virtually impossible that we will ever know what happened to Dennis Martin. Human nature being what it is, we want to have an answer to something. We want to have an explanation. But it's become one of the enduring mysteries of the Smokies. And perhaps that's the most terrifying thing of all. Not the unknown, but the knowing that we will never know. Somewhere beneath the layers of fallen leaves and rotting wood and decades of mountain silence, there may be an answer. A small skeleton, a scrap of red fabric, or there may be nothing at all. The forest keeps its secrets, and after 56 years, it's not likely to give this one up." Dennis Martin was swallowed in broad daylight, leaving behind nothing but silence. But sometimes the wilderness doesn't erase everything at once. Sometimes it leaves something behind. A fragment, a piece of evidence. Now, we move to the peaks of California. A 12-year-old boy lingers on a trail for just a few moments. When his group turns around, he's gone. They will never find his body, but they will find his backpack and his camera. And the last photograph developed from that roll of film, taken in the pitch-black darkness of the forest, is something that defies all logic. Something that will keep you awake at night. "12 photographs. That's all that was left of Jared Negrete. 12 snapshots on a disposable Kodak camera found beneath a bush on the side of a mountain where a 12-year-old boy had simply ceased to exist. 11 of those photographs showed exactly what you'd expect from a Boy Scout's first overnight camping trip. Landscapes, trees, the kind of pictures a kid takes when he's excited to be somewhere new, somewhere wild, somewhere that makes him feel like an explorer. But the 12th photograph was different. It was taken at night. The flash had fired, illuminating nothing but darkness and a face pressed close to the lens. Only the eyes and nose are visible. Jared's eyes, Jared's nose. Staring into the camera in the pitch-black wilderness of Mount San Gorgonio, somewhere he should never have been alone, at an hour when someone should have already found him. No one knows exactly when that photograph was taken. No one knows why he took it. Some believe he was using the flash as a makeshift light, desperately trying to see something in the darkness. Others believe it was a cry for help, a final attempt to leave evidence of his existence. What everyone agrees on is this: after that photograph was taken, Jared Michael Negrete was never seen again. Not a footprint, not a thread of clothing, not a single trace. Over 3,000 people would search for him, 45,000 hours, 50 square miles of wilderness. Helicopters with infrared cameras swept the mountainside. Dogs tracked his scent to a point, and then stopped, confused, as if the trail had simply evaporated. and through it all, the mountain kept its secret. To understand what happened to Jared Negrete, you first have to understand who he was. And more importantly, you have to understand the place that swallowed him whole. Jared was born on September 11th, 1978, in El Monte, California, a working-class suburb east of Los Angeles, where the San Gabriel Mountains rise like a wall against the horizon. He was 12 years old in the summer of 1991, an 8th grader with black hair, brown eyes, and a small birthmark on his right cheek. He wore glasses with brown plastic frames that made him look studious, thoughtful, maybe a little shy. And he was shy. Those who knew him described Jared as quiet, intelligent, the kind of kid who observed more than he spoke. He wasn't the fastest. He wasn't the strongest. At 5'2" and 150 pounds, he was what adults politely called a little heavy for his age. But he had a good heart. He wasn't a quitter. His family were devoted members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and Jared had recently joined Boy Scout Troop 538, sponsored by their local congregation. The troop was planning an overnight backpacking trip to the summit of Mount San Gorgonio, the highest peak in Southern California. At 11,503 feet, it towers over the San Bernardino National Forest like a sleeping giant, its rocky shoulders draped in ancient pines. For Jared, this would be his first real adventure. His first night sleeping under the stars, away from home, away from the familiar streets of El Monte. He was nervous, probably. Excited, certainly. He had no way of knowing that he would never return. San Gorgonio Mountain has many names. The locals call it Old Grayback, for the way its granite peak turns silver in certain light. The Cahuilla people, who have lived in its shadow for thousands of years, have their own name for it, and their own stories about what lives in its forests and ravines. It is a place of staggering beauty. Cathedral groves of Jeffrey pines and white firs, their bark smelling of vanilla and butterscotch in the summer heat. Meadows carpeted with wildflowers, streams running crystal clear over smooth stones. On a clear day, you can see all the way to the Pacific Ocean from its summit. But San Gorgonio is also unforgiving. The terrain is brutal, a maze of switchback trails that zigzag up steep slopes, with sheer rock walls that drop into impenetrable fields of manzanita brush. The elevation steals your breath. The temperature can swing 40 degrees between noon and midnight. And once you leave the marked trails, the wilderness closes around you like a fist. This is where Jared Negrete spent the last hours anyone would ever see him. On Thursday, July 18th, 1991, Jared and 5 other scouts set out from the trailhead with their leader, a man named Dennis. They hiked to a base camp near Dry Lake, where they spent the night. Then the next morning, Friday the 19th, they broke camp and began the push toward the summit. It was a perfect day. The kind of day that exists only in memory and photographs, when the sky is so blue it hurts to look at it, and the air tastes like pine needles and possibility. The boys laughed and joked as they climbed, their voices carrying through the trees. But Jared was struggling. The altitude was getting to him. The thin air at 10,000 feet made his lungs burn with every step. His legs, unaccustomed to this kind of exertion, felt like they were filled with sand. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, he began to fall behind. By 6 o'clock that evening, the group was approximately 1,000 feet from the summit. So close. They could practically touch it. But Jared couldn't keep up anymore. He was exhausted, his face red, his breath coming in ragged gasps. What happened next would haunt everyone involved for the rest of their lives. The Scoutmaster made a decision. He told Jaryd to sit down and rest. The group would continue to the summit, and they would pick him up on the way back down. It wouldn't be long. An hour, maybe 2. Jaryd had water. He had snacks. He was on a marked trail. He would be fine. And so they left him there. A 12-year-old boy, alone on a mountain, on his first overnight trip. It was the last time anyone from his troop would ever see him. Other hikers passed Jaryd on the trail that evening. A group noticed him straggling behind his troop and mentioned it to the Scoutmaster when they reached the summit. The Scoutmaster assured them he would collect the boy on the way down. One hiker in particular would become crucial to the investigation. He was a firefighter from Santa Ana, an experienced outdoorsman who knew these mountains well. He encountered Jaryd walking alone and noticed something troubling. The boy was cutting switchbacks. Switchbacks are the zigzag patterns that trails use to climb steep slopes. They're designed to make the ascent manageable, to prevent erosion, to keep hikers safe. Cutting switchbacks means leaving the trail, walking straight up or down the slope instead of following the path. It's dangerous. It's how people get lost. It's how people lose their way. The firefighter warned Jaryd to stay on the marked trail. He told him it wasn't safe to shortcut. Jaryd, perhaps embarrassed, perhaps eager to catch up with his group, acknowledged the warning. The firefighter continued on his way. He was the last person to see Jared Negrete. The time was approximately 6 p.m. When the Scoutmaster led his troop back down the mountain, Jaryd was not where they had left him. He wasn't anywhere on the trail. They called his name. They searched the immediate area. Nothing. The Scoutmaster made another decision. This one, correct. He gathered the other 5 boys and led them back to base camp as quickly as possible. Then he hiked 12 miles through the darkness to find help, reaching the park rangers around midnight. The temperature had already dropped into the low 50s. Somewhere on that mountain, a 12-year-old boy was alone in the dark. Perhaps he was huddled beneath a tree, trying to stay warm. Perhaps he was still walking, lost, looking for the trail. Perhaps he had already lost his way completely. Or perhaps something else had happened, something no one was ready to consider. At 7 a.m. on Saturday, July 20th, 1991, one of the largest search and rescue operations in the history of the San Bernardino National Forest began. San Bernardino County Sheriff's deputies, search and rescue teams from Sierra Madre, San Dimas, and a dozen other agencies, helicopters with infrared sensors, horseback units, tracking dogs. Within days, the search had expanded to include over 200 volunteers, then 500, then 1,000. They combed 130 square miles of wilderness. They crawled through brush so thick that searchers had to move on their hands and knees. They rappelled down cliff faces and waded through streams swollen with recent rainfall. On the second day, they found something. Footprints. A set of shoe prints at approximately 10,000 feet, matching the tread pattern of Jaryd's black high-top pro-wing sneakers. The discovery electrified the search teams. He had been here. He had walked this ground. They were on the right track. The prints led away from the Vivian Creek Trail, heading downhill into a canyon. Exactly what the firefighter had warned him not to do. Jaryd had cut the switchbacks and descended below the trail, into terrain that grew wilder and more treacherous with every step. On July 27th, 8 days after Jaryd disappeared, searchers made a crucial discovery. Beneath a bush, approximately 45 feet off the Vivian Creek Trail, they found a disposable Kodak camera. Nearby were wrappers from beef jerky and fruit rolls, snacks that Jaryd had been carrying. He had been here. He had sat in this spot, eaten his food, perhaps rested. But where had he gone next? The camera was sent to a lab to develop the film. 12 photographs. 11 of them showed landscapes, trees, the kind of scenery shots a boy takes on his first big adventure. They were taken before his disappearance, during the happier hours of the trip. But the 12th photograph stopped everyone cold. It showed a face pressed close to the camera lens. Only the eyes and nose were visible, illuminated by the harsh white flash against a background of absolute darkness. Jaryd's face. Jaryd's eyes, looking directly into the camera. The photograph had been taken at night, after he disappeared, after the sun had set and the mountain had turned black. Why did he take that picture? The most common theory is practical. He was using the flash as a light source, trying to see in the darkness. A disposable camera's flash only lasts a fraction of a second, but in total darkness, even that brief burst would have been blinding, disorienting. Perhaps he was trying to find his way. Perhaps he was trying to see what was around him. Others wonder if it was intentional in a different way. A final message. A record of his existence. As if some part of him knew that he might not be found, and he wanted to leave something behind. We will never know what Jaryd was thinking when he pressed that shutter. We will never know what he saw in the brief flash of light. All we know is that after that moment, the camera was set down, or dropped, or lost, and Jaryd walked into the darkness and never came back. The search continued for 16 days. By the time it was called off on August 4th, 1991, over 3,000 volunteers had logged 45,000 hours searching 50 square miles of wilderness. They found nothing else. No remains, no clothing, no physical trace whatsoever. The terrain below where his camera was found was brutal. A canyon with steep walls, thick brush, cliffs, and waterfalls. One of the searchers who spent weeks looking for Jaryd later described crawling on his belly through manzanita so dense he couldn't stand up. He said if Jaryd had gone into that brush, he could be feet away, and they would never see him. But that explanation only goes so far. Infrared helicopters swept the area. They should have detected thermal anomalies that might indicate his presence. The helicopters found wildlife, small animals, nothing human. Tracking dogs followed his scent from the camera location and then stopped, not gradually faded the way scent trails do over time. Stopped. As if Jaryd had simply ceased to exist at that spot. The authorities declared that the chance of survival was almost nil. On September 7th, 1991, nearly 2 months after he disappeared, Jaryd's family held a memorial service in Hacienda Heights. Over 500 people attended. Relatives, friends, fellow scouts, members of their church. But not everyone was there to mourn. Jaryd's uncle stood in the doorway of the church, refusing to step inside. He later told an elder, "To the day I die, I'll believe that this church and the Boy Scouts of America are responsible for what happened to my nephew." The question that haunts this case is deceptively simple. What happened to Jared Negrete? the most likely explanation is also the most tragic. A tired, inexperienced boy left alone on a mountain made a series of small mistakes that compounded into disaster. He cut the switchbacks. He descended below the trail. He got lost in terrain that would challenge an experienced adult. As darkness fell, he became disoriented and lost his way completely. Perhaps he stumbled into one of the ravines that scar the mountainside. Perhaps the brush closed over him like a green curtain. Perhaps he remains there still, hidden in some fold of the mountain that no searcher ever reached. But there are aspects of this case that don't fit neatly into that explanation. The tracking dogs that lost his scent so abruptly. The infrared cameras that found nothing. The 30-plus years of hikers who have walked those trails since 1991, and the 0 remains that have ever been discovered. Some have suggested foul play. A private investigator hired by the Negrete family claimed to have found evidence suggesting Jaryd might have been taken. He pointed to other incidents in the area around the same time. A 10-year-old boy who escaped an attempted abduction in September of that year. A man who claimed he had been taken and buried up to his neck before escaping. But no concrete evidence has ever linked these incidents. No suspects were ever identified. And the idea that someone could have taken a boy from a busy trail without attracting any attention strains credibility. Animal encounter is another possibility that has been considered and largely dismissed. Black bears inhabit these mountains, as do mountain lions. But there were no signs of a struggle at the scene. No drag marks. No evidence of any confrontation. An animal encounter of that nature would have left obvious traces. And so we are left with questions that have no answers. How does a person vanish so completely from a mountain where thousands of people hike every year? How does someone remain hidden for over 3 decades in an area that has been searched repeatedly? And what was Jaryd looking at in that final photograph, in the fraction of a second when the flash illuminated the darkness around him? 10 years after Jaryd disappeared, his father Felipe hiked to the summit of Mount San Gorgonio. He walked the same trail his son had walked. He breathed the same thin air. He looked out at the same endless wilderness that had swallowed his boy. He later said that during the hike, he felt his son's presence. Not a ghost, not a haunting, but something gentler. A sense that Jaryd was there with him, somewhere in the rustle of wind through the pines, somewhere in the warmth of the sun on his face. It gave him a measure of peace. Not closure, because there can be no closure without answers, but peace. The Negrete family eventually moved from El Monte to Walnut, California. They adopted 2 more children, trying to fill the hole that Jaryd's absence had left in their lives. But Linda Negrete, Jaryd's mother, said that no child could ever replace him. No amount of time could erase the wound. Today, the Vivian Creek Trail remains one of the most popular routes to the summit of San Gorgonio. Thousands of hikers climb it every year, pausing to catch their breath at switchbacks, taking photographs of the stunning views, reaching the top, and feeling the satisfaction of standing on the highest point in Southern California. Most of them have never heard of Jaryd Negrete. They don't know that somewhere along that trail, at a spot no one has ever been able to identify, a 12-year-old boy left the path and walked into the forest. They don't know about the camera found beneath a bush, or the photograph that showed only eyes and nose in the darkness. They don't know that for over 30 years, the mountain has kept its secret. Mount San Gorgonio doesn't care. It has stood for millions of years, and it will stand for millions more. It has watched generations of humans come and go. Some of them it let leave. Some of them it kept. The wilderness is not evil. It is not malicious. It is simply indifferent. And sometimes that indifference is more terrifying than any malevolence could ever be. If Jared Negrete were alive today, he would be 46 years old. He might have a family of his own. Children who would never know that their father once got lost on a mountain and lived to tell the tale. But Jared is not 46. Jared remains forever 12 in that photograph, his eyes staring into a camera flash in the darkness of a July night. Somewhere on Mount San Gorgonio, the pines still whisper in the wind. The streams still run over smooth stones. The switchbacks still climb toward a summit that touches the sky. And somewhere, perhaps in a ravine no one has ever reached, or beneath brush too thick to penetrate, or in a place that exists only in the space between memory and forgetting, Jared is still waiting. Waiting to be found. Waiting to come home. The trees know what happened, but the trees don't speak. And the mountain never tells. Jared Negrete's last photograph reminds us that the darkness of the wilderness hides things our minds refuse to accept. But what happens when the only physical evidence ever recovered makes no mathematical or spatial sense whatsoever? Now we explore the case that literally shattered the laws of logic. A 3-year-old boy vanishes in Colorado, just 3 feet away from the adults in his group. No trace, no sound, nothing. But 4 years later, hundreds of feet higher in elevation, on a rocky cliff face inaccessible even to experienced mountaineers, 2 hikers find his clothes, intact, turned inside out, as if he had been physically extracted from them. No tears, no animal marks, no explanation. Three years, 8 months, and 4 days. That's how long Jaryd Atadero had been alive when he vanished from a hiking trail in Colorado. But here's what haunts investigators to this day. When they finally found what remained, it wasn't on the trail. It wasn't in the river. It was 500 feet above the trail, on a 45-degree slope. A slope so steep that adult searchers needed an hour just to climb up to it. And his shoes? His tiny Tarzan sneakers? After 4 Colorado winters, after 4 years of rain, snow, and mountain winds, they looked like someone had just stepped out of them, pristine, almost untouched. The official report reads, "Undetermined probable wildlife encounter." But there was no blood on his clothing, no animal hair that could be identified, and his pants were found turned completely inside out. Wildlife doesn't do that. On October 2nd, 1999, a 3-year-old boy with a smile that lit up every photograph walked into the wilderness of the Roosevelt National Forest. He was surrounded by 11 adults. He was never more than 100 feet from someone who could see him. And then, in broad daylight, on a well-traveled trail, Jaryd Atadero simply vanished. What you're about to hear is one of the most baffling disappearances in American wilderness history. A case where every theory has holes, where every answer raises 10 more questions, and where the truth may remain locked forever in the silence of the Colorado mountains. The morning of October 2nd, 1999, was what locals call a bluebird day. The sky stretched endless and impossibly blue over the peaks of the Roosevelt National Forest, 60 miles west of Fort Collins. The aspens had begun their autumn transformation, splashing gold across the mountainsides. The air carried that crisp bite that promises adventure without danger. Jaryd Atadero stood on the porch of the Poudre River Resort, the mountain lodge he owned with his twin brother Arlen, watching his 2 children bounce with excitement. Jocelyn was 6. Jared would turn 4 in just a few weeks. They wanted desperately to go see the fish at a nearby hatchery with members of the Christian Singles Network, a group that had become like family to the single father. Alan was a physical education teacher, a careful man. He hesitated at first, but the group assured him they were only going to the hatchery, a short trip, perfectly safe. He knew these people. He trusted them. He watched Jared run toward the group's vehicles, his shoes untied as always. The boy hated tying his laces. It was one of those small details that would later take on unbearable significance. Somewhere between the hatchery and what seemed like a beautiful opportunity, the plan changed. The weather was too perfect to waste. The Big South Trail was right there, beckoning. Without consulting Alan, the 11 adults decided to take his children on an 11-mile wilderness trail through the Comanche Peak Wilderness area. The Big South Trail is not a gentle walk. It climbs through rocky terrain at over 8,000 feet of elevation. Sections narrow to just 24 inches, with loose shale sliding down toward the river below. Mountain lions roam these slopes. Black bears forage in the shadows. It is breathtakingly beautiful and utterly unforgiving. The group began hiking around 10 in the morning. As often happens, they naturally separated into 2 clusters. The faster hikers pulled ahead. The slower ones fell behind. And Jared, energetic and curious, moved between them. About 1.5 miles up the trail, near a marker for campsite 2, Jared encountered 2 fishermen preparing their gear by the Cache la Poudre River. The boy stopped to talk to them. He carried a makeshift walking stick he'd fashioned from a branch, proud of his discovery. And then he asked them a question that would echo through the investigation for decades. "Are there any bears in these woods?" The fishermen looked at this small boy, alone on a wilderness trail, and chose not to frighten him. They told him no. They could see a group of hikers 50 to 80 feet down the trail. They assumed he belonged to them. They watched him walk rapidly up the trail, past the Camp 2 sign, disappearing around a bend. It was approximately 11:30 in the morning. No one in the hiking group ever saw Jared again. The first indication that something was wrong came as a sound. Somewhere between 11:30 and noon, members of the group heard a child scream echo through the canyon. Some thought it sounded playful. One woman thought it sounded like fear. 6-year-old Jocelyn would later tell her father something unsettling. She thought it sounded like her brother was suddenly silenced. For the next hour, the group searched the trail. They called his name. They checked behind boulders and trees. They asked other hikers if anyone had seen a small boy. A woman who had been jogging on the trail said she had seen no one. By 2:40 in the afternoon, members of the group drove back to the resort. Jaryd Atadero was working when they arrived. The moment he saw their faces, he knew. "They lost my baby." The words tore from him like a physical wound. By 4 p.m., Alan had called 911. By 6:30, the first search and rescue teams arrived at the Big South trailhead. Within hours, what would become the largest search operation in Larimer County history was underway. But there was a detail that would only become significant later. A detail hiding in plain sight. One of the searchers hiked quickly up the trail to where snow still covered the higher elevations. He saw no small footprints in the snow. Nothing leading away from the trail. It was as if Jaryd had reached a certain point on that path and simply vanished. The search that followed was unlike anything Larimer County had ever seen. Over 200 trained volunteers poured into the canyon. 12 dog teams worked the rugged terrain, their paws wrapped in protective padding against the sharp rocks. Dive teams probed the shallow pools of the river. Helicopters swept the mountainsides. A fixed-wing plane made passes overhead, scanning for any sign of the missing boy. Bill Nelson, then undersheriff of Larimer County, led the operation. He was confident. "We should be able to get in there with our people and do what we've done hundreds of times," he said. "Find the person." He took a quick nap just before midnight and told his staff to wake him when they found the boy. When he woke the next morning in the front seat of his pickup truck, Jaryd still had not been found. And Bill Nelson began to understand that this case would be different. On October 3rd, tragedy compounded tragedy. An Air Force UH-1N Huey helicopter assisting in the search encountered swirling mountain winds. At 100 feet above the trees, the rotor struck branches and snapped in two. The helicopter plummeted. Mark Sheets, a veteran of Larimer County Search and Rescue, was severely injured in the crash. 3 vertebrae in his back were broken. His shoulder was shattered. 5 people were hurt. The helicopter that might have searched the higher elevations was destroyed. And somewhere on that mountain, a 3-year-old boy was alone in the wilderness as night fell and temperatures dropped. The search became a spectacle. 17 satellite trucks lined Highway 14. Psychics called in with visions. A barefoot man appeared with a donkey, offering to track the boy. A Native American performed a ritual, asking the mountain to give up the child. False sightings flooded in from across the country. But the dogs found nothing. The divers found nothing. The 200 searchers who combed every inch of that canyon found nothing. A scent dog got a hit at campsite 3 that ended at a drop-off to the river. But the terrain there was too difficult for a 3-year-old to navigate alone. There was one clue, and it only deepened the mystery. Searchers found mountain lion tracks in the area. The tracks came down toward a smaller set of prints, and where the animal prints and the child's prints met, the child's prints disappeared. After 6 days of searching, 8 days of around-the-clock effort, the operation was suspended. The case went cold. Jaryd Atadero was left with nothing but questions and a grief that would define the rest of his life. For 3 years, 8 months, and 2 days, the mountains kept their secret. On June 4th, 2003, 2 Fort Collins businessmen named Rob Osborne and Gareth Watts decided to explore off-trail in the Big South area. They had hiked here before. They had talked about the mystery of Jaryd Atadero, wondering what had really happened to that little boy. This time, they decided to climb up a steep talus slope, a field of loose rock angling 45 degrees away from the trail. It took them about an hour to scramble 500 feet above the Big South Trail. And then Rob Osborne saw a shoe. It was a small white Tarzan sneaker, and it was pristine. Gareth Watts stared at it in disbelief. It was like somebody had just took their foot right out of it, he would later say. It was fresh. I thought I would see a kid standing in front of me. Near the first shoe, they found the second. Then a brown fleece jacket with puncture marks. Then blue sweatpants, badly tattered, with one leg mostly gone, scattered by birds building nests. The pants were turned completely inside out. The items were scattered across a 25-foot area on a slope so steep that searchers would need an hour just to reach it. Remember that detail from the beginning? The one about the shoes? Here it is. 4 years of Colorado weather. 4 winters of snow and ice. 4 summers of rain and sun. Those conditions destroy fabric, leather, rubber. They bleach colors and crack soles. But Jaryd's sneakers showed minimal weathering. No sign of having been dragged. No damage consistent with being carried up a mountain by an animal. 8 days later, searchers returned to the site. In a crevice in the rocks, illuminated by a single shaft of sunlight, they found partial remains. Nearby, on a log spanning the crevice, sat a single tooth. DNA testing would eventually confirm with 100% certainty that what they found belonged to Jaryd Atadero. According to Larimer County Search and Rescue's own report, searchers on foot had never made it up to that 9,120-foot elevation during the original search. The crashed helicopter might have covered that area, but it never got the chance. For 4 years, Jaryd had waited, 500 feet above the trail where he vanished, in a location that defied every logical explanation for how he got there. The official ruling was undetermined, probable wildlife encounter. It's the most rational explanation. Mountain lions do roam these mountains. They do approach small, vulnerable animals. A quick, silent encounter could explain why no one heard sustained screaming. An animal could have carried something small up the slope. But the theory has problems. Significant problems. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation tested Jaryd's clothing. They found no blood. None. In a wildlife encounter, there should have been blood. They found 2 hairs on the clothing that could not be conclusively identified as belonging to any known animal. Jaryd Atadero consulted experts on big cats. They told him something that made the theory even more troubling. A mountain lion's typical behavior would have left clear evidence on the clothing. Jaryd's sweater showed no signs consistent with such an encounter. And then there were the pants, turned inside out. Wildlife doesn't undress its prey. Animals don't carefully remove clothing and turn it inside out. That's not animal behavior. The shoes showed no damage consistent with being dragged up a mountain. The nylon material should have been destroyed. But they looked almost new. If not wildlife, then what? Some investigators quietly suggested foul play. Someone who took the boy, then returned his belongings to the mountain years later. It would explain the inside-out pants. It would explain the pristine condition of the shoes. It would explain the lack of blood. But there was only one easy way out of that narrow canyon, back down the trail. To escape in any other direction would require climbing 1,000 feet or more through dense forest and downed logs on a 45-degree slope, without anyone seeing. The sheriff dismissed the theory. "I've never heard of someone taking a child and then walking around in public," he said. But Jaryd Atadero would later point to the Elizabeth Smart case, where a young girl was taken and seen in public with her captors for 9 months before being rescued. The drowning theory doesn't fit either. The river was searched thoroughly. And the river doesn't carry things 500 feet uphill. The truth is, every explanation fails somewhere. Every theory has holes you could drive a truck through. And the evidence that was found raises more questions than it answers. How did a 3-year-old reach a point 500 feet up a 45-degree slope that takes adults an hour to navigate? If wildlife was responsible, where is the blood? If someone took him, how did they escape undetected? Why were his shoes almost pristine after 4 years in the elements? Why were his pants turned inside out? The mountain isn't talking. Jaryd Atadero spent the rest of his life searching for answers. He kept Jaryd's bedroom exactly as it was before October 2nd, 1999. The Star Wars toys. The Oakland Raiders hat. Everything preserved exactly as his son had left it. "This is all I have of him," he said. He channeled his grief into advocacy. He lobbied state legislators. He testified before committees. He met with Governor Bill Owens at the signing of Colorado's Amber Alert law in 2002, a system he helped bring to the state. The Big South Trail was renamed the Jaryd Atadero Legacy Trail. A safety sign now stands at the trailhead. He wrote a book. He gave interviews. He described Jaryd as a pebble in his shoe. "You know it's there," he said. "Every time you take a step, you feel it. You can't do anything about it. But it's not enough to stop you from doing what you need to do every day." In April 2025, Jaryd Atadero passed away at his home in Ohio. He was 67 years old. His twin brother Arlen spoke at his funeral. "He always knew that the day would come when he met Jaryd again," Arlen said. "That we know now." Arlen had once imagined that reunion. He said he would look at Jaryd and ask, "What happened?" And Jaryd would look at him and say, "Dad, does it really matter?" Today, the Big South Trail remains open to the public. Hikers photograph the aspens in autumn. They marvel at the crystal clarity of the Cache La Poudre River. They pass the Camp 2 marker without knowing what happened there. They never think to look up at the steep talus slope 500 feet above, where a little boy waited for 4 years to be found. The wilderness doesn't remember Jaryd Atadero. The mountains don't mourn him. The river that sang past him on that October morning sings the same song today. But somewhere in those peaks, there is an answer. Somewhere in that vast indifference, the truth exists. The rocks know what happened. The ancient pines know what happened. The mountain lions that still roam those slopes, they know, but they will never tell. Jaryd was found at an elevation a child could have never reached on his own, 500 feet above the trail after 4 years of silence. The wilderness doesn't need years. Sometimes it only needs 3 minutes, just a few steps away from everything you know. You have just witnessed the first chapter of the TrailVoid archives. If these cases have left you looking over your shoulder, you're starting to understand. Subscribe to the channel. The investigation continues. Because out here, the void is always watching.